The handcuffs clicked shut on Sarah Mitchell's wrists as the police officer smirked. Another delusional wannabe soldier. The metal was cold against her skin, but not as cold as the judgment in the eyes of the crowd gathering around her. Sarah Mitchell stood there, a quiet blonde woman in her 30s, arrested at Riverside Military Academy's prestigious recruitment fair in Cedar Falls, Missouri. Her alleged crime? Impersonating a Navy SEAL after she'd quietly corrected a recruiter's dangerous misinformation about sniper protocols. The crowd's phones were out, recording what they believed was another case of stolen valor, another pretender trying to claim glory that wasn't theirs. But why would this seemingly ordinary woman in worn jeans and a simple flannel shirt risk federal charges by claiming elite military service? The stakes were clear to everyone watching. If she was just another military pretender, she deserved the humiliation and legal consequences coming her way. But something about her silence, her refusal to defend herself, suggested there was more to this story than anyone in that crowd could imagine. The arresting officer had no idea that the woman he was leading away in handcuffs once held the record for the longest confirmed kill shot in SEAL Team 6 history. As they guided her toward the police car, a figure in the crowd shifted. Retired Admiral Robert Kane, attending as a VIP guest, noticed something that made his blood run cold. There, barely visible on her wrist as the handcuffs caught the light, was a small tattoo that would change everything. Riverside Military Academy's annual recruitment fair buzzed with activity on that crisp October morning in Cedar Falls, Missouri. This wasn't just any small-town event. The prestigious fair drew military branches from across the nation, each competing for the attention of the Academy's top candidates. Crisp uniforms, polished medals, and carefully rehearsed pitches filled the gymnasium and sprawling outdoor grounds. The smell of fresh coffee mixed with boot polish and autumn leaves as hundreds of young hopefuls and their families wandered between the colorful displays. Sarah Mitchell arrived alone, parking her beat-up Ford pickup at the far edge of the lot. At 34, she moved with a particular kind of purpose that went unnoticed by most. Her blonde hair was pulled back in a simple ponytail, her outfit unremarkable, worn jeans, brown work boots, and a faded blue flannel shirt. She observed from the periphery, her gray eyes taking in every detail of the recruitment displays with an intensity that belied her casual appearance. While other visitors chatted excitedly and posed for photos with the equipment displays, Sarah remained silent, methodically working her way through the crowd. Colonel James Hartford, a 52-year-old recruitment officer with a chest full of ribbons and a patronizing smile, manned the Special Operations booth. His silver hair was perfectly styled, his uniform immaculate, and his attitude toward female visitors barely concealed. When Sarah approached his display and quietly inquired about the Special Operations selection process, Hartford's smile widened condescendingly. "Honey, maybe you should try the Navy nursing program instead. They're always looking for caring women like yourself." His tone suggested this conversation was already over. Sarah's jaw tightened, almost imperceptibly, but she said nothing, simply nodding and moving on. Across the quad, Sergeant Mike Torres commanded attention at the Warrior Challenge booth. The loud, barrel-chested Iraq veteran was in his element, regaling a crowd of impressed teenagers with exaggerated war stories while demonstrating weapon handling techniques. "This is how we cleared buildings in Fallujah," he boasted, his movements theatrical and imprecise. "You've got to be aggressive, dominant. The enemy can smell fear." His audience hung on every word, phones recording his performance. Sarah stood at the back of the crowd, her trained eye catching multiple technical errors in his presentation. Finger on the trigger when it shouldn't be, muzzle sweeping across the crowd, magazine insertion that would jam in real combat. She said nothing. The moment shifted when Torres, high on his own performance, challenged the crowd. "Any of you think you've got what it takes? Come on up here and show us what you've got." The teenagers shuffled nervously, but Sarah stepped forward through the parting crowd. Torres's grin widened. "Well, well, little lady wants to play soldier?" The crowd chuckled. Sarah didn't respond to the taunt. She simply reached for the demonstration rifle with movements so precise they seemed almost mechanical. Her weapons inspection was textbook perfect, checking the chamber, examining the bolt, testing the trigger pull with the weapon pointed safely downrange. Her stance, her grip, even the way she breathed spoke of countless hours of muscle memory. Torres's expression shifted from amusement to irritation. Something about this woman's confidence threatened his spotlight. "Where'd you learn to handle a weapon like that?" he demanded, his voice carrying an edge. Sarah handed the rifle back with the same precise movements. Her response was barely above a whisper, but it carried. "I served." Nothing more. No elaboration, no unit designation, no war stories. Just two words that hung in the air like a challenge. "What would you do if everyone assumed you were lying about your biggest accomplishment?" The silence that followed Sarah's simple declaration lasted only seconds before Torres's eyes narrowed on her wrist. As she'd handed back the rifle, her sleeve had pulled up just enough to reveal a small tattoo, a trident crossed with rifles etched in black ink against pale skin. His face flushed red with indignation. "That's a SEAL insignia," Torres's voice boomed across the fairgrounds, his finger jabbing toward her wrist. "She's impersonating military personnel. This woman is claiming to be a Navy SEAL." The accusation rippled through the crowd like wildfire. Phones that had been casually recording suddenly focused with intent, their owners sensing viral content in the making. The crowd pressed closer, a mixture of curiosity and righteous anger building in the air. Veterans in the audience shook their heads in disgust. Civilians whispered about stolen valor, and the teenagers who'd been impressed by Torres now looked at Sarah with contempt. Colonel Hartford pushed through the gathering mob, his face twisted with institutional authority. "Ma'am, I'm calling base security immediately. Impersonating military personnel is a federal offense." He pulled out his phone with theatrical importance. "We've a stolen valor situation at the Warrior Challenge booth." Yes, a woman claiming to be a Navy SEAL. Sarah stood perfectly still in the eye of this growing storm. Her breathing remained steady, her posture unchanged. She didn't defend herself, didn't offer explanations or excuses. This silence only fueled the crowd's anger further. Torres stepped closer, his bulk an intentional intimidation. "Real SEALs don't look like soccer moms. Real SEALs earn their tridents through blood and sweat. You're insulting every warrior who's actually been through Bud/S." Other veterans in the crowd joined the chorus of condemnation. "Admit what you did," one shouted. "My brother died in Afghanistan. People like you disgrace his memory," another added. Base security arrived within minutes, two uniformed officers pushing through the crowd with practiced efficiency. Sarah's response to their arrival was telling. She simply held out her wrists before they asked, complying without resistance. The senior officer, a young man who looked like he'd rather be anywhere else, cleared his throat. "Ma'am, we need to ask you some questions about your military service claims," Hartford interjected before Sarah could respond, his voice dripping with patronizing certainty. "Officer, this is clear-cut. Navy SEALs are exclusively male. They have been throughout their entire history. This woman is either delusional or a criminal, trying to profit from false military claims." The situation escalated when Hartford insisted on calling the civilian police. "This goes beyond base jurisdiction. Federal impersonation charges need to be filed." The crowd's energy shifted from anger to cruel satisfaction. Justice was being served. Another faker was being exposed. Torres couldn't resist one final jab as they waited for the police. "Say something. Defend yourself. Tell us what unit you served with, what class you graduated from." Sarah finally looked directly at him, her gray eyes carrying a weight that made him step back involuntarily. Her voice was calm, almost gentle. "I have nothing to prove to you." When the Cedar Falls police arrived, the arrest proceeded with mechanical efficiency. The officer, clearly uncomfortable with the attention from dozens of recording phones, read Sarah her rights while applying the handcuffs. The metal clicked shut with a finality that pleased the crowd. "Another delusional wannabe soldier," the officer muttered, loud enough for the nearest phones to pick up. Sarah didn't react to the insult, didn't flinch at the restraints. She moved with the same precise control she'd shown with the rifle, turning to be led away without resistance. But in that crowd, one person wasn't celebrating. Admiral Robert Kane had been watching from the VIP tent, initially dismissive of the commotion. But as Sarah was led past his position, something about her movement patterns caught his attention. The way she rolled her shoulders against the handcuffs, the specific angle of her chin, the controlled breathing despite the stress, it was all maddeningly familiar. He moved closer, his 70-year-old eyes straining to see better. Then he saw it clearly, the tattoo. Not just any seal trident, but a specific design, one with subtle modifications that most people would never notice. The crown of the trident had 5 points instead of 4. The rifle crosshairs contained a ghost image barely visible in the ink. Kane's face drained of color as recognition crashed over him like a cold wave. He knew that tattoo. More importantly, he knew who wore it. He tried to push through the crowd, his voice lost in the mob's satisfaction. "Wait! Stop! You don't understand who she is!" But the police car was already pulling away, Sarah visible through the rear window, her expression unchanged, her secrets intact. As the crowd began to disperse, already uploading their videos with hashtags about stolen valor and justice served, Admiral Kane stood frozen in place. Then, with hands that trembled slightly, he pulled out his phone and began searching frantically through old military photos, stored in a secure cloud folder he hadn't accessed in years. Have you ever judged someone without knowing their real story? Admiral Kane's fingers moved with desperate urgency across his phone screen, but accessing classified military databases from a civilian device wasn't simple. His VIP credentials meant nothing to the Pentagon's secure servers. Frustrated, he dialed a number he hadn't used in years. "Charlie? It's Bob Kane. I need you to verify something for me. That female SEAL sniper from Team 6 Ghost 23, what was her real name?" The voice on the other end hesitated. "Bob, you know that's classified. Besides, she's been dead for 5 years. Kane's grip tightened on the phone. "Charlie, I'm standing at a recruitment fair in Missouri, and I just watched them arrest a woman with Ghost's exact tattoo. Same movement patterns, same tactical breathing. I need confirmation." The silence stretched before Charlie responded. "Give me 10 minutes. I'll call you back." Those 10 minutes felt like hours as Kane paced the parking lot, his mind racing through the implications. When his phone finally rang, Charlie's voice was shaken. "Bob, I pulled the file. Sarah Mitchell, call sign Ghost 23. But here's the thing. Her body was never recovered from Syria. The official report lists her as KIA based on witness accounts and blood evidence, but..." Kane finished the thought. "But no body means no confirmation. Charlie, I think she's alive, and the Cedar Falls police just arrested her for stolen valor." Kane didn't waste another second. He commandeered a base vehicle and raced toward the Cedar Falls police station, calling in every favor he had along the way. At the station, he burst through the doors but was met with immediate resistance. The desk sergeant, a burly man named Peterson, wasn't impressed by Kane's urgency. "Sir, I don't care if you're an admiral or the president himself. We have procedures. The woman in custody is being processed for federal impersonation charge." Kane slammed his credentials on the desk. "Son, that woman has more confirmed kills than your entire department has arrests. You've detained a classified operative." Peterson crossed his arms. "Then where's her military ID? Where's any proof besides a tattoo that could be fake?" The standoff escalated when Kane demanded to speak with the chief. The chief, a political appointee more concerned with optics than operations, was even less cooperative. "Admiral, we've had 3 stolen valor cases this month. This woman refused to provide any documentation, any unit designation, any verifiable information. She's either mentally ill or a criminal, and either way she's not leaving until the federal authorities arrive." Kane's frustration boiled over. "She can't provide documentation because officially she doesn't exist. She's listed as KIA to protect her from..." He stopped, realizing he was about to reveal classified information in a room full of civilians. Meanwhile, in the holding cell, Sarah sat motionless on the metal bench. But when she heard Kane's voice echoing through the station, something shifted. For the first time since her arrest, emotion flickered across her face. Not relief, but something closer to anger. When a guard passed, she spoke for the first time. "Tell the Admiral I don't need his help. Tell him I chose this." The guard, confused, relayed the message. Kane's response was immediate. He pushed past Peterson, his military bearing making the younger man step aside instinctively. "Sarah, I know you're angry. I know the system failed you, but this isn't the way." Through the bars, their eyes met, and the years of buried rage finally found voice. "Failed me?" Sarah's laugh was bitter, sharp enough to cut. "The system didn't fail me, Admiral. It sacrificed me. It took my team, my identity, my entire life, and called it necessary. 6 men died because the system protected traitors in uniform instead of warriors in the field." Her hands gripped the bars, knuckles white. "You want to know why I didn't defend myself out there? Because I spent 3 years defending myself to people just like them. 3 years of classified hearings where I had to justify every shot, every decision, while the men who sold us out got lawyers and plea deals." The police chief, drawn by the commotion, arrived to find his holding area had become a confessional. Sarah's control, maintained so carefully throughout the day, finally cracked completely. "You know what they told me after the hearings. For your safety, you need to disappear. For national security, you need to die." So I did. I buried Ghost 2-3 with her team and tried to become nobody. But nobody still has memories. Nobody still wakes up counting muzzle flashes. Nobody still sees her teammates' faces in every crowd. Tears ran down her face now, the first anyone had seen. "I came to that fair because I heard Torres teaching kids the same cowboy tactics that get people killed. I couldn't stay silent." "Not again." Kane pulled out his phone, showing the chief a video call with Charlie, who held up classified documents. "Chief, this is Commander Charles Harrison, Naval Special Warfare Command. I'm confirming that the woman in your custody is Lieutenant Sarah Mitchell, Navy SEAL, Team 6. Her records are sealed under the National Security Act. You will release her immediately or face federal obstruction charges." The chief's face went through several shades of pale before he nodded to Peterson. "Get her out, now." But even as the cell door opened, Sarah hesitated. "I'm tired of being their ghost, Admiral. Tired of living in shadows because the truth is inconvenient." The drive back to the recruitment fair was heavy with unspoken truths. Sarah sat in the passenger seat, her emotional armor rebuilding itself with each mile. "They need to know," Kane said quietly. "Those people, they need to understand what they did." Sarah's response revealed the depth of her disillusionment. "Why? So they can feel guilty for 5 minutes before they go back to their lives? So they can share my story on social media and feel good about supporting veterans?" She stared out the window. "I don't want their pity, Admiral. I wanted their competence. I wanted them to train those kids right, so maybe, just maybe, some mother doesn't get a folded flag instead of her son." When they arrived back at Riverside Military Academy, word had already spread. The crowd that reformed was different, subdued, uncertain. Kane strode directly to the main platform, but this time Sarah followed, her decision made. If they were going to tell her story, she'd tell it her way. Kane connected his tablet to the display screen, pulling up the classified photos Charlie had sent. "The woman you had arrested today is Sarah Mitchell, call sign Ghost 23. She is one of the most decorated snipers in United States military history." The photos appeared, Sarah in full tactical gear, Sarah receiving commendations, Sarah with her team. But it was Sarah who took the microphone, her voice steady despite the tears that had dried on her cheeks. "You want to know who I am? I'm the woman who put bullets through the skulls of 34 confirmed insurgents who would have killed American soldiers. I'm the woman who spent 72 hours in a hide site, pissing in bottles and eating cold MREs to take out a bomb maker who'd killed dozens. I'm also the woman who failed to save 6 brothers, because someone in our own command sold our position for money." She clicked to the next image, the memorial photo of her team. "I'm the ghost who survived when better people didn't." The crowd's transformation was visceral. Where before there had been righteous anger, now there was shame. Where there had been judgment, now there was recognition of their failure. Torres stood at the front, his earlier bravado completely evaporated. Hartford loosened his collar, unable to meet Sarah's eyes. The young recruits watched in stunned silence as Sarah continued her brutal honesty. I didn't defend myself, because I've learned that nobody wants to hear the truth. They want the Hollywood version, where heroes come home to parades. They don't want to know that we come home to empty apartments and full pill bottles. They don't want to know that the system that sends us to die can't be bothered to protect us when we survive. Could you carry the weight of surviving when your friends didn't? Torres broke the suffocating silence with a question that trembled on his lips. Why didn't you just tell us who you were? Sarah had been walking away, her shoulders set in a line that suggested finality, but she paused at his words. Slowly, deliberately, she turned back to face the crowd. The emotional control she'd rebuilt during the drive shattered again, but this time the anger was cold, focused. Because I'm not that person anymore, she said, her voice carrying across the silent fairground. Ghost 2-3 died in Syria with her team. What you see now is what the system left behind. A woman who can't use her real name, can't acknowledge her service, can't even visit her teammates' graves without checking for surveillance first. But Sarah wasn't finished. The dam had broken completely now, and years of suppressed rage poured out. I came here today because I heard your recruitment pitch, Sergeant Torres. Your Hollywood tactics, your action movie bravado. You were teaching those kids to die gloriously, instead of teaching them to survive efficiently. She moved toward the weapons display with purposeful strides, her movements sharp with barely controlled emotion. Without asking permission, she picked up the demonstration rifle. You want to know the difference between your training and mine? You teach them to be heroes. I learned to be a ghost. Heroes get medals. Ghosts get to come home. Her demonstration was savage in its efficiency. Where Torres had been loud and showy, she was silent and lethal. In Fallujah, your room-clearing method lasts 30 seconds before someone puts a bullet through your skull. Here's what actually works. She moved through the tactical positions with a fluidity that made several veterans in the crowd step back. No announcements, no warnings. You become death itself, and death doesn't need to shout. Each movement was accompanied by a story, a lesson paid for in blood. Martinez died because he announced his position clearing a room. Thompson caught a sniper's bullet because he silhouetted himself in a doorway like you just taught these kids to do. The young recruit scrambled for notebooks, recognizing the difference between performance and profession. But Sarah's lesson went deeper than tactics. You want to serve? Learn this first. The system will use you up and throw you away. It will demand everything and promise nothing. It will ask you to kill for it, die for it, and then pretend you don't exist when it's convenient. Her voice cracked with emotion. I'm not telling you not to serve. I'm telling you to go in with your eyes open. Because the hardest battle isn't against the enemy. It's against the machine that sends you to fight and then abandons you when you come home broken. Artford, his earlier condescension replaced by desperate damage control, stepped forward with an offer. Ms. Mitchell, on behalf of Riverside Military Academy, I formally apologize for our treatment of you. We'd be honored if you'd consider a position as our military liaison, helping train the next generation of warriors. Sarah's response was immediate and harsh. You want to honor me? Stop lying to these kids. Stop selling them glory and teaching them to die for it. The ones who need to come home, who have families waiting, who have lives to live after the uniform comes off. Teach them to be efficient, not heroic. Admiral Kane chose that moment to reveal additional classified details. There's more you should know. Sarah's death wasn't just about protecting her from enemy retaliation. She was the key witness in a military corruption investigation that went all the way to Pentagon procurement offices. 3 high-ranking officers and 2 defense contractors were selling weapon shipments to insurgent groups. The crowd's shock deepened. Sarah discovered the operation when she noticed her team's missions were being compromised with suspicious regularity. Equipment failures, intelligence leaks, ambush patterns that suggested inside information. Sarah's hands shook as she set down the rifle. 6 good people died because someone in a comfortable office decided their lives were worth less than $30,000 in kickbacks. Roberts had a 2-year-old daughter. Johnson was getting married in the spring. Martinez sent half his pay to his mother in El Paso. Thompson collected baseball cards. Davis wrote poetry. Walker was 19 years old. Her voice broke completely on the last name. I memorized everything about them because someone should remember them as more than names on a wall. Someone should know that Walker called his mom every Sunday, that Davis read Hemingway in his downtime, that Roberts carried his daughter's ultrasound photo in his chest pocket. The crowd grappled with this raw display of grief. They'd expected heroic stoicism and gotten human agony instead. A veteran in the crowd removed his hat, others following in spontaneous memorial. Torres found his voice again, subdued and genuine. You saved how many lives with your actions? Your testimony? Your service? Sarah's response cut deep, not the ones that mattered most. I can tell you exact numbers: 34 confirmed enemy kills, approximately 200 lives saved through intervention. But I couldn't save the 6 men who trusted me to bring them home. Mathematics doesn't balance that equation. The respect that built in that moment was different from celebrity worship. No one asked for selfies or autographs. The veterans present recognized a wound that would never heal. Young recruits took detailed notes on her technical corrections, understanding that this knowledge came at an unbearable price. But Sarah wasn't done with her indictment of the system. You know what happened to those officers who sold out my team? Minimum security prison. 3 years max. They'll be out before Walker would have finished college. The system protected them better than it ever protected us. So forgive me if I don't trust institutions or their promises anymore. As she prepared to leave again, the distant sound of engines announced a new complication. A local news van pulled into the parking lot, its satellite dish already extending. Sarah's entire body tensed, the trauma response of someone who'd learned that visibility meant death. But this time, instead of retreating, she stood her ground, though her hands trembled. "Let them come," she said quietly. "Let them try to make this pretty for the cameras. Maybe someone needs to see what their thank you for your service really looks like. What would true strength look like if it didn't need to prove itself?" The news crew descended like vultures scenting carrion, their reporter already smoothing her hair as she approached. But Sarah didn't retreat this time. Instead, she stood her ground, though her body language screamed of someone fighting every instinct to flee. The reporter's voice carried that manufactured excitement that made Sarah's jaw clench. "Excuse me, ma'am. We understand you're a female Navy SEAL, a real American hero. America needs to hear your story. You could inspire millions of young women." The microphone thrust toward Sarah's face might as well have been a weapon, but she didn't flinch. "America needs to hear the truth," Sarah said, her voice steady despite the visible tremor in her hands. "Not the sanitized version you'll broadcast. America needs to know that we train our children to die for abstract concepts while the people making those decisions count profit margins. America needs to know that the corruption that killed my team was investigated, documented, and then buried. Because it implicated people too powerful to prosecute fully." The reporter's smile faltered. This wasn't the grateful hero narrative she'd expected. "But surely you're proud of your service, of breaking barriers as a female SEAL." Sarah's laugh was sharp enough to cut. "Proud? I'm proud of the lives I saved. I'm proud of the shots I made. But I'm not proud of surviving when better people didn't. I'm not proud of being a symbol when I'd rather be anonymous. And I'm definitely not proud of a system that used my team as bait while protecting the criminals who sold us out." She looked directly into the camera. "You want inspiration? Here it is. Question everything. Demand accountability. Don't let them turn your children into statistics for someone else's glory." As the reporter retreated to regroup, a young woman separated herself from the crowd of recruits. She couldn't have been more than 18, with determination in her eyes that suggested she'd already faced her share of battles. She approached Sarah with none of the starstruck awe of her peers. "Ma'am, I don't care about the fame or the stories. How do I know if I'm strong enough?" Sarah studied the girl for a long moment, seeing something of herself before the world broke her. Without a word, she walked to the weapons display and picked up a disassembled rifle. What followed was a masterclass in patient instruction. Sarah showed the girl how to maintain the weapon with movements that were meditative in their precision. But more than that, she taught her to question, why this angle? Because it reduced exposure. Why this grip? Because under stress, fine motor control fails. Always ask why. Never accept because that's how it's done as an answer. When they finished, Sarah spoke quietly, meant only for the girl's ears. Strength isn't about being fearless. It's about being terrified and doing the job anyway. It's about choosing your team over glory every time. But most importantly, it's about knowing when to walk away. The military will take everything you offer and ask for more. Don't give them more than you can afford to lose. Sarah rolled up her left sleeve then, fully revealing what the crowd had only glimpsed. The SEAL Trident tattoo was just the tip. Beneath it, 6 names in simple script: Roberts, Johnson, Martinez, Thompson, Davis, Walker. All dated January 9th, 2020. Below that, in tiny letters, Ghost 23, Forever, KIA. But there was more. Surgical scars crisscrossing her forearm, evidence of wounds that should have killed her. "This is what survival looks like," she said simply. "This is what your thank you for your service means to those who carry it." Admiral Kane moved closer, his own burden of knowledge heavy. "You should know," he said to the crowd, "I recommended her for the Medal of Honor. The citation was approved. She refused the ceremony, sent the medal back." He paused. "She said heroes don't survive, but I think the truth is harder. She couldn't accept recognition from the same system that failed to protect her team." Sarah's response revealed the depth of her ongoing struggle. "Every morning I wake up in a country that asks people to die for it, but won't protect them from its own corruption. I choose to keep living, Admiral, but don't mistake that for forgiveness." The transformation in the crowd was complete but complex. Torres quietly removed his military patches, understanding finally that his bravado was an insult to real service. Hartford began mentally restructuring everything about his recruitment program. The young recruits absorbed lessons no classroom could teach. But Sarah wasn't finished. "You want to honor veterans? Stop making more of us. Stop sending kids to die for wars that make rich men richer. Stop pretending that a flag-draped coffin is worth a mother's child. And if you must send them, then for God's sake, train them right. Give them leaders who value their lives more than their own careers. Give them equipment that works and intelligence that isn't compromised. Give them a chance to come home." As she prepared to leave for the final time, Sarah moved with exhausted purpose. The emotional toll of the day was written in every line of her body. Admiral Kane watched her go with deep respect tinged with sorrow. "Some truths are too heavy for most people to carry," he said to no one in particular. "She carries them so others don't have to." The crowd began to disperse, but the weight of what they'd witnessed would remain. They'd come for a recruitment fair and received an education in the true cost of service. The epilogue wrote itself in the months that followed. Sarah returned to her simple life in Cedar Falls, working at Jacobson's hardware store. But something had changed. The veterans who came to her for help found someone who no longer hid her knowledge. She taught them practical skills, but also harder truths. How to navigate VA bureaucracy, how to recognize PTSD symptoms, how to live with survival when others didn't. She never glorified service, never romanticized warfare. Instead, she offered something more valuable: brutal honesty about what came after. At the local shooting range, Sarah could be found in the early morning hours, training a small group. But her lessons went beyond marksmanship. "The hardest shot you'll ever take," she told them, "is the one you choose not to. The military teaches you to pull the trigger. Life after requires learning when not to." Her students called her coach, understanding that her knowledge came from places darker than they could imagine. In her shadow, Ghost 23 lived on, not as legend but as warning, not as inspiration but as education. The camera would pull back to reveal Sarah's workshop, where on the wall hung a single photograph. 6 warriors, frozen in time before betrayal stole their futures. Sarah would glance at it between customers, a daily reminder of the price of service. But now, beside it, hung something new. Letters from young veterans she'd helped, people who'd chosen life over glory because of her words. It wasn't redemption, could never be, but it was purpose, and sometimes that's enough. In Cedar Falls, they knew her story now. Not the Hollywood version, but the truth, messy, painful, ongoing. They knew she was someone who'd given everything and received back only trauma and abandonment. They knew the system had failed her, used her up and discarded her. But they also knew she kept going, kept helping, kept choosing to live another day. Ghost 2-3 still serves, just differently now. Her battlefield is smaller but no less important, saving lives not through violence but through truth, bringing people home not from war but from the aftermath. And somewhere in the darkness before dawn, when nightmares painted her ceiling with faces of the dead, Sarah Mitchell continues the hardest mission of all, living with what survival cost while refusing to let others pay the same price. The system didn't break her, couldn't silence her. In the end, that might be the only victory that matters, because every young recruit she trains properly, every veteran she helps navigate the aftermath, every truth she speaks that others won't, that's one more person who might make it home. And sometimes, in the quiet moments, between heartbeats, that's almost enough to balance the equation. Are you ready to see strength in a completely different way?
Oh, Daisy here. Có người hỏi tôi rằng là tôi lấy ý tưởng video từ đâu? Great questions. Mình sẽ làm video chia sẻ về process sáng tạo nhé. Hãy thêm câu hỏi dưới phần comments và đừng quên subscribe để không bỏ lỡ Q&A video nha.